The hangar smelled of hydraulic fluid and scorched oil, the kind of scent that never really washed out of flight suits no matter how many times you sent them through base laundry. Captain Elena Torres stood beside her Apache, her hand resting on the scarred metal of the fuselage, as if grounding herself in the machine she trusted more than most people she knew. The AH-64 towered above her like a predator at rest, rotors stilled but carrying the memory of every mission flown. She had logged nearly 2,000 hours in the cockpit, flown through tracer fire over Kandahar, held the line during ambushes in Iraq, and carried home crews who swore they'd never make it back. And yet, here she was again, listening to the low hum of voices in the command tent that told her the same silent truth. She was good enough to fly, but not trusted enough to lead. The operations screen glowed against the dark canvas walls, maps shifting with enemy positions that seemed to multiply by the minute. Somewhere deep in the red-shaded zone, a special forces team was pinned down, cut off by enemy fire, and a series of coordinated attacks that had pushed them into a kill box. Comms with the ground were spotty at best. Interference screamed across the channels, fragments of shouts lost to static. All anyone knew for certain was that they were surrounded, low on ammunition, and minutes away from being overrun. "Recommend we hold Apaches until Major Collins is wheels up," one colonel muttered, his voice clipped, his eyes darting between screens. "He's flown this sector before. He knows the terrain." Elena didn't move. She sat at the edge of the tent, helmet in her lap, the glow of the screens reflecting in her dark eyes. Collins was an excellent pilot, no doubt, but he wasn't here. His crew was still prepping, their bird needing a systems reset after a software fault. That would take at least 30 minutes. 30 minutes the Special Forces unit didn't have. "I can be airborne in 5, she said evenly, her voice steady but carrying the edge of steel that came only from conviction. The room went quiet for a heartbeat. A few officers looked her way, but most returned to their screens, deliberately busy. One lieutenant cleared his throat. "Respectfully, ma'am, this is a high-pressure situation. We need someone who's handled this kind of tempo before." Elena felt the heat rise in her chest, but her face betrayed nothing. She had handled worse tempos than this. She had flown cover for convoys with insurgents closing from every direction. She had landed under fire to extract downed pilots, and she had done it with a calm precision that others had called machine-like. But in this tent, surrounded by men who had decided long before tonight that she wasn't their first choice, those facts felt invisible. The radio crackled with another fragment from the field. Gunfire bled through the static, followed by a strained voice. "Taking heavy contact. Position compromised. Request immediate." Then silence. The channel died in a hiss of white noise. Elena's jaw tightened. Every second wasted here was another second closer to body bags. She glanced once more at the glowing maps, watching the red dots swarm toward the blinking blue that represented the pinned-down unit. Her fingers tightened around the helmet in her lap, the hard shell pressing into her palms. She said nothing more, because nothing she could say would shift minds already made up. Instead, she sat in silence, her frustration buried under the same professional composure that had kept her alive in combat. Outside, the Apache waited with patient stillness, a beast that didn't care about politics or doubt. It only cared about the pilot who would command it. Elena knew she could be airborne before the men in this room finished another round of cautious debate. She knew she could change the outcome. But for now, she was grounded by hesitation, by perception, by the weight of doubt that hung heavier than any loadout of rockets and hellfires. And still, she waited. Because when the order finally came, when desperation forced their hand, she would be ready. The desert stretched out like a sheet of black glass beneath the Apache's nose, broken only by the faint shimmer of heat signatures flickering across Elena Torres' helmet display. Her gloved hands moved smoothly over the controls, every motion deliberate, as the rotors cut through the night with that low, predatory thrum that set her pulse to match their rhythm. She had flown missions before, many of them worse than this, but tonight carried a different weight. Tonight, she wasn't just flying into enemy fire, she was flying into doubt. Command had saddled her with escort duty alongside Captain Mark Hensley, a pilot the brass trusted to lead the engagement. She was here not as the point of the spear, but as the shadow behind it, the prove-yourself-or-fail presence that everyone expected to fold under pressure. Her voice came calm over the comms as she reported takeoff. Hammer 2, airborne. Time to target, 6 minutes. Hensley's acknowledgement came a beat later, his tone clipped, as though even on the same mission he wanted to make clear who was in charge. Elena let it slide. She had learned long ago that respect in the air wasn't given, it was taken. The first flashes appeared before they even reached the engagement zone, arcs of tracer fire clawing up from the dunes, glowing red lines that split the night sky. Mortars thudded in the distance, sending blossoms of fire into the desert floor where the Special Forces unit was pinned. Her sensors painted the battlefield in cold digital clarity. Multiple vehicles moving fast from the north, anti-air emplacements dug into the ridgeline, and at least one heavy machine gun nest hammering rounds into the blue icons of the trapped friendlies. Contact, Hensley muttered, his voice suddenly tight. I count at least 3 convoys, heavy weapons. This is worse than briefed. Worse didn't begin to cover it. Elena's display showed enemy units converging in a tightening noose, their movements precise, coordinated. Whoever was running this ambush knew what they were doing. Recommend holding position until we can assess further, Hensley said, pulling his Apache slightly higher, outside the heaviest arcs of fire. Elena felt her teeth grind. Assess further, while men on the ground screamed for help. The comms burst alive with their desperate calls, static choked but unmistakable. Incoming armor from the west, running low, where the hell is our cover? The sound of strained voices, of gunfire close enough to drown out the speakers, cut through her like a blade. Through the thick glass of the cockpit, she could see it muzzle flashes crawling across the ridgeline, the desert night lit like a fireworks show designed only for death. For a split second, she saw herself as Command must have seen her, the cautious one, the one better left in support, and then she dismissed it. She had not spent years mastering this aircraft, had not bled through deployments and flown through walls of tracer fire, just to sit in the shadows while good soldiers died. Her hand shifted over the weapons control, thumb pressing down with practiced certainty. Hammer 2 engaging, she said flatly. Elena, hold your... Hensley's voice cut across the net, but she was already diving low, the Apache's nose pitching down, rotors howling as the desert rushed up to meet her. The world outside became a storm of light tracers streaking past, mortars bursting in columns of flame. Her gunner called out targets, voice steady, and Elena's movements became pure instinct. The 30mm chain gun roared beneath her, carving arcs of fire into the ridgeline. Hellfire locks buzzed in her helmet, and she loosed them one after another, streaks of death that turned armored vehicles into torn metal skeletons. The hesitation in her wingman's voice vanished as he scrambled to follow her lead, but Elena wasn't listening anymore. Her focus had narrowed to the dance between her and the enemy, the way the Apache responded like an extension of her own body. Each maneuver cut through the firestorm with surgical precision, her machine and her will fused into one. The ground unit's desperate calls shifted, their panic giving way to stunned relief. Air cover inbound targets are burning, keep hitting them. Elena barely heard them. She was past hearing, past doubt. She was where she belonged, inside the fire, making the choice no one else would make, carrying lives in the turn of her hands. The desert night became a furnace of fire and noise, and Elena Torres was at its center. The Apache bucked against her hands as she pulled into another dive, the cockpit vibrating with the heavy rhythm of the chain gun firing beneath her. Brass casings rattled and spilled like rain through the chute, and each burst of 30mm tore into the ridgeline with brutal precision. Enemy silhouettes vanished in sprays of dust and debris, their machine gun nests silenced one by one. She felt the shudder of return fire streaking past her canopy, tracers so close they lit her visor in staccato flashes, but her grip didn't falter. The bird responded like it had always been waiting for her, rotors screaming against the desert air as she twisted it into angles most pilots would never dare. "Target locked," her gunner called, his voice calm, steady, feeding into her focus. She barely needed him. Every mark felt like instinct, but she let the confirmation anchor her. Her thumb flicked down. A hellfire dropped from the wing, a white streak of fury that raced into the heart of an armored vehicle below. The explosion painted the sand red and orange, shattering the night. Secondary blasts followed as ammunition cooked off, and the ground lit up like a flare signaling her defiance. "Hammer 2-3, direct hit," Elena reported, her tone clipped and level, as though she weren't flying through a storm designed to kill her. On the command net, there was a pause. The kind of silence where men stared at each other, realizing the thing they doubted might be the only thing holding their people together. Then came the voice of the ground commander, ragged and breathless over static. "Keep it coming. That's the only thing keeping us alive down here." Elena banked hard, pushing the Apache low over the dunes. Rocket pods armed with a growl in her headset, and she unleashed a ripple of fire that walked down a convoy line, trucks erupting one after the other in plumes of flame. Enemy tracers followed, searching, desperate, but too slow. She was never where they aimed. Each maneuver was textbook, drilled into her bones after years of flying, yet she made them look like art, clean, efficient, devastating. Her wingman finally broke his paralysis and followed, loosing his own rounds into the chaos. But it was Elena's voice, calm and unshaken, that filled the net. "Targets neutralized, corridor clear, push south." She was speaking as if she were running a training sim, not carving open a battlefield where men's lives bled out with every second. On the ground, the Special Forces team had gone silent on comms, not out of fear, but awe. Through their NVGs they could see her Apache cutting black shapes against the stars, every dive traced in fire, every climb leaving a trail of destruction behind. Men who had written her off as an afterthought, who had sneered at the idea of her leading a mission, now watched her hold the sky by sheer will. She wasn't just covering them, she was rewriting the outcome of the night with each pull of the trigger. Another mortar position lit up, muzzle flash stabbing the dark, and Elena rolled the Apache into a near-vertical dive. Warning tones screamed in her headset. Enemy lock-on alarms filling her ears, but she tuned them out. Her vision tunneled down to the reticle, the targeting cues, the red-hot signature of her enemy. She pressed down, the chain gun thundered, and the mortar pit disappeared in a storm of fire. Her gunner exhaled into the mic, low and astonished. "Clean kill." Elena didn't answer. She was already climbing again, rotors chopping at the heated air, eyes scanning for the next threat. Behind her, soldiers who had been seconds from annihilation were moving, rallying, alive because she had refused to hesitate. Command back at base was still trying to process what they were hearing, voices crowding the channel, disbelief tangled with admiration. But Elena ignored them all. She wasn't flying for their approval. She was flying for the men trapped below, and for the quiet, relentless truth she had always known. Doubt burned away in fire, and tonight, the sky itself was proof. The Apache hung over the desert like a shadow refusing to leave, its rotors chopping ragged circles in the air as Elena Torres held it steady above the battered convoy. Warning lights glowed across her console. Fuel critically low, ammunition racks nearly empty, hydraulic pressure in the red. Every gauge told her to turn back, to break away before she pushed the machine beyond recovery. But she stayed, hovering just above the blackened stretch of earth where the Special Forces survivors dragged themselves into defensive positions. Until reinforcements arrived, until they were safe, she wasn't leaving. The radio crackled with broken voices, exhaustion bleeding into every syllable. "Hammer 2, whoever you are, you kept us breathing. We'd be gone without you." Another voice, younger, half-choked with disbelief. "Tell that pilot. Tell her she just saved all of us." Their gratitude came in bursts, unpolished and raw, carried through static as if the desert itself wanted to keep those words alive. Elena said nothing back. She never did. Her silence wasn't arrogance, it was discipline, the same quiet composure that had guided every shot, every dive, every impossible maneuver through the firestorm. On the horizon, lights appeared. Armored transports crawling over the dunes. Medevac helicopters cutting across the night sky, with their red beacons flashing like slow, steady heartbeats. Relief flooded the comms as ground troops waved smoke signals and rescue birds began their descent. Elena's Apache circled once, a guardian reluctant to leave its post, before she finally keyed her mic. Convoy secure. Reinforcements inbound. Hammer 2 returning to base. The words were clinical, but her voice carried something beneath it, a steel edge that said she would stay until the last man was aboard if she had to. The return flight was silent. Hensley's Apache trailed her at a distance, his crew quiet, their earlier hesitation unspoken but heavy in the space between them. When they touched down at the forward operating base, the air was thick with the weight of what had just happened. Mechanics rushed out, eyes widening as they counted the scars across her bird's fuselage, shredded plating, pocked holes from small arms fire, paint scorched away in long black streaks. The Apache looked like it had flown through hell itself and come back with the proof stamped into its skin. Her fellow pilots gathered near the hangar doors, a loose cluster of uniforms and quiet stares. No one spoke as she climbed down from the cockpit, pulling off her helmet with the same calm precision she had carried into the fight. They didn't jeer, they didn't smirk, they couldn't. For months, some had whispered that she wasn't ready, that she wasn't the one to trust when the air turned hot. Tonight, every one of them had heard her transmissions, calm and steady as she tore through enemy lines. Every one of them knew who had kept that unit alive. They looked at her now, but not directly. Their eyes dropped when hers met theirs, not in dismissal, but in something else: respect. A respect they hadn't thought she could earn, one carved into them not by argument or reputation, but by fire and survival. Elena walked into the hangar alone, the echo of her boots carrying through the cavernous space. The Apache stood there under the harsh fluorescent lights, its shadow stretching across the concrete floor, battered and magnificent. She reached out, her hand sliding across the torn fuselage, fingers tracing the scars that matched her own unseen ones. The machine had bled for her, and with it she had proven what she had always known. Doubt didn't matter, rumors didn't matter. What mattered was the moment when lives hung in the balance, when hesitation meant death, and someone had to fly into the fire. She had done that. She had carried them through. And now, in the silence after, she knew the truth she had lived by all along. Doubt dies in the fire, and the only thing that remains is what you do when everything is on the line.